Finance Media, and welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. I am actually joined by both Keith Sargent and James Crash today. It's a July miracle, fellas. I've missed you both. You know, between coronavirus and vacations and everything else going on in the world, we just haven't had this bonding time. I'm lonely. I need your camaraderie, Sarge.
The band is back together.
The band is back together.
Crash is on the kazoo. I'm on the banjo. What do you got? Paliti?
I'm a lead singer, of course. I've got no musical talent. I can't play an instrument. I'll hum into the harmonica a little bit. All right. A lot of talk about here because, you know, we're in this weird zone now where we just have no idea what's going to happen with the college football season. You know, 2 months ago, if you had asked me, I would have felt pretty good about it happening. Now I've got absolutely no hope it's going to happen. There's just so many different scenarios of what might happen. Let's just break the whole thing down. And, you know, I think we should start with that very basic question, gentlemen. I'm going to put it to you right away. Give me your percentage. We're talking a football season that begins in September. What percentage do you think that's going to happen, Sarge?
20%.
20
in the fall.
Okay.
20% might be even lower. And that, I mean, obviously, you know, we all read, you know, Keith Almo's story. We see the press releases. We see the program shutting down. We see pretty much the out clause that the Big Ten gave in their statement when they went down to conference only schedule. But then I talked to someone, wasn't even a Rutgers official, but another Power 5 school, and I asked their percentage, and they said 0%. So now this person by nature is a pessimist, but you know, so 20%. You know, I might be an optimist at 20%, but with every passing day, you just see the national numbers, and you see, you know, the states. New Jersey is doing relatively well. You and I both covered this extensively at a time when it was doing terribly. Now the numbers are doing a lot better. But, you know, the hardest hit states, Politi, are some of the you know, the blue blood states when it comes to college football. Florida, Texas, you know, throughout the entire country. You know, I think we're more than half the states are seeing surges. So it's just not a good sign at this point.
Now, Sarge, you certainly know this. Kratz, you might not know this, but I'm a big fan of the TV game show Card Sharks. And on Card Sharks, when Sarge answers 20%, for you to get control of the cards, you have to go higher or lower than that to get control and win and see if you can win money in the big board. So you're going to go higher than 20 or lower than 20%?
I will go higher.
Higher than 20%. How much higher? What number would you say?
I'm going to shock people, and you guys are going to mock me, and I'll probably come to regret this in a couple weeks. I'm at 50%. I think it's a coin toss.
You think it's a coin toss even now? Okay, why?
Yes, because so this is not a perfect metric by any stretch of the imagination. I added up all the publicly known testing numbers we've gotten from Big Ten schools. Some schools, like Rutgers, won't release their testing info. Some schools have released it as recently as Monday morning. Some have released it as recently as 2 weeks ago. Others, like Nebraska, haven't released official numbers, but they basically gave a guesstimate to local media. It was about 3,000 tests total. The positivity rate was 2.2% for all these tests involving athletes, coaches, staff members. The World Health Organization, and I tweeted this the last 2 days, says that 5% positivity rate is kind of like a magic number, where if you're 5 or below, that's good, and you can kind of begin to reopen, and if you're over 5, that's where it's bad. Now, only 4 Big Ten states are under 5 right now, but with the exception of like Iowa, but only 4 of them of the 11 are on the Tri-State Travel Advisory, and some of them, like Ohio, I believe Maryland is one. They appear to be kind of stagnant or on the decline. So I just feel like if there's a 2.2% positivity rate, and it's probably higher because we don't know Ohio State's number, but even Maryland, when they shut down workouts the other day, they were sub 5 with their results. I just feel like unless a government says you cannot play the season, there's a complete outbreak, or somebody has a big spike in a positivity rate, I just feel like these schools are going to push through. And that's why I think that given that the Big Ten state, I think it's entirely possible we get to September and the SEC is not playing at all. But the Big Ten is, just because they have boxed themselves into a conference schedule now, and their states seem to be doing better.
But it's 2.2% now. They haven't even started, really. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, we haven't even gotten them all here. We haven't even.
No, I agree. But my question is, look, and we're going to discuss this later. I am waiting for the press release to come out that, hey, we're canceling all sports but football. And two, Rutgers is not really going to have students on campus. If these other Big Ten schools move that way to save football, which is what they probably are going to do, I almost feel like once the players get on campus, if they keep the testing, if they keep the positivity rate down, they might have a shot to start the season. And at that point, if they get 4 games in and then have to shut it down, that makes it a lot easier to restart in the spring and still have a normal fall 2021, which is what I think their goal has to be.
Right. I guess that is, Sarge, the one thing about that. There's a chance they could start it, and if they get some games in, it's better than no games in, just from a strict TV perspective. And that was one quote from, again, we mentioned this story that Pete Thamel for Yahoo Sports wrote, just a complete negative look on everything that's going on. And so many different voices in college sports are just, kind of writing off the prospect of the season. But there was one television executive quoted who said that they will keep on pushing it and pushing it and pushing it because it doesn't matter when it happens. They have to have programming to get that money. What do you think about that scenario, Sarge? Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first off, I think the 2.2% number is flawed only because, like you said, a lot of schools are not announcing them. For one, I mean, who knows if you're not announcing it? You could probably assume at this point that it's higher than 2.2%. That there's a reason why they're not announcing it, because if they did have positive, if they did have good numbers to report, they would. So the 2.2 number, either way, we're talking about. Let's be clear here, okay? That if this wasn't about the money, which I understand why we're to this point, and when it's not like Pat Hobbs or 80s that other schools are just pocketing the money, but the concern here with presidents and ADs on that level is they need a football season to get the TV money in order not to cut sports, in order not to have mass layoffs. You're seeing schools that are cutting their communications department, they're cutting so many jobs. We are looking at a complete, just a teardown of the college athletics model if there's not a college football season in some form. So I get it. If we were just talking about, being rational about this, they would not play a college football season. You're talking about college athletes who are not being compensated. They're not being paid. They're not, the NBA. They're not professional, athletes who are getting compensated. Spare me the talk about that they get a free education. Don't even go there. If you're being rational about it, they would not have a season. But Cratch is right. I mean, we've gotten to this point where they want to do everything they can to get some semblance of that TV money. And, if they could get 3 or 4 games before they shut down, before they bring their players back, then they have to see that their entire offensive line or their entire defensive line, got it, and they have to shut down. And then you see, mass casualties in that form. I think they're going to try to push it. There's a possibility. I think they'll try to push it. That's why I'm at 20%. Otherwise, if you're being rational about it, it would be a 0%.
It's sort of fascinating too. And then, when you talk about the different scenarios we've heard, scenario one, we just talked about, would be season starts in September, get some number of games in. That would be what the plan is. Just charge into it. Scenario two, and this is a lot of people say, well, why don't you just start it in the spring? I haven't seen much enthusiasm for that from people either. I mean, Kratz, from what you've read and people you've talked to, do you think that if this thing falls apart in the next few weeks, is there a chance that there's spring football? They're going to wait it out until December and see what's happening in the world? I mean, what happens then in scenario two?
I think there's a chance that there's spring football, but honestly, if I had to, I would say I think it's more likely that there's no football period, and that the TV networks basically bail out big time college football.
Totally agree.
Then there's spring, because when we were talking about spring football in like March, April, when this was all starting, I think the idea people had was, well, if we have a spring season, training camp's going to start right after Thanksgiving, and we're going to play, January 1, and we're going to basically be done by the time March Madness is over. And then even then, if you said, okay, maybe we only play 10 games in the fall instead of 12, you're still going to have a relatively normal fall season with a relatively normal off-season break. But if you're not starting until March or April, you can't have these kids play 30 games in 9 months, which is what, like a Clemson or an Alabama might be looking at. So I just think that the spring season's a non-starter. I think, like, if you're the Big Ten, you could probably have a spring season, but you'd have to say, okay, we're only going to play conference only this spring and in the fall of 2021. And you have to take yourself, in my opinion, out of the competition for a bowl game or the college football playoff, which they're not going to do. I actually think we would be better off for college football this year if the college football playoff announced that they were not going to have a college football playoff this year, and there were going to be no bowl games. Because that way you could just play as many games as you can, work with your TV partners, and move on.
Sarge, you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much money in the college football playoff crash that I don't think that anyone wants to see that scenario.
But if you expand it to 8 next year.
Plus, from a TV standpoint, I mean, you have to be playing for something. That's the whole lure of right. Of why are you watching it if there's not meaning to the conclusion of the season. Again, I mean, I Cratch makes some good points. He's an optimist. I respect that. There's nothing, to be clear, there's nothing I would rather do. And I know Politi probably feels the same way after, for 3-4 months of covering this, of talking to nurses and talking to EMTs and talking to funeral directors and doing all the things that we've done to cover this. There's nothing I would rather do than cover college football. All that being said, We're looking at the NBA with the struggles. They put $150 million into this bubble scenario, and they're already having issues. MLB has been a joke when it comes to its testing and the number of players who have tested positive and the number of players who have actually bailed out on it. That's the other thing. I mean, we haven't even gotten to that point where college athletes, college football players, just say no, or I'm not going to do this. I mean, that is going to happen. I mean, there were college football players who were bailing out of bowl games in order to pursue the NFL draft, and that was just because they're thinking about their NFL futures. There is going to be a huge amount of college football players who are just not going to take part of it. They're going to keep their scholarship. The Big Ten has already said that any athlete who opts out is entitled to keep their scholarship. We're just scratching at the surface of issues right now. The one thing is that we do have a sense of are a lot of these conferences. 3 of the 5 Power 5 have said probably by August 1st is when they're gonna give either green light or put a stop to it. So I guess there's probably hope that maybe in the next 2 weeks that we see some of these cases go down. But Steve, I mean, I'll ask you, having covered this, do you have any hope in society that all of a sudden that these numbers are going to start leveling out?
I have very low hope in society right now, Sarge, to say the least. I mean, I have less hope in society than I do hope for a college football season. No, of course not. No, I mean, we've failed on every level. We failed on, this is not a political podcast, so I won't mention names, but we failed on a national level to get a way to solve this thing. We failed on a local level, people making mass political. The whole thing has just been one massive failure. We don't deserve college football, essentially, is where we're at now, which is very sad to say, but it's the truth. And, and that's why I think if we're talking about the 3 scenarios, when you're looking at, having the season start in the fall, I give it less than 20%. I give it a 5% chance. And then I think it's just going to we're going to keep on pushing it, keep on punting until, we're going to have to face the reality that, there is a good chance we don't have college sports at all this year. That's where I think we are because of exactly what you say, because I just don't see any way that with the trends, the way they're going, that all of a sudden, that it's going to get magically better. And there's not going to be an appetite for educators to say, hey, let's have college football, even though we don't have, the new president of Rutgers is going to have only 5% of his students on campus, but he's going to have a college football team playing. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, and if that happens, and I throw this one out there because that's scenario 3, I mean, what happens to Rutgers? What happens to college football? I mean, what if there is no sports this year? Sarge, I know you're working on the story. Give me the doomsday scenario as to what this thing looks like.
Yeah, it's not pretty. And I'm looking at some of the financial ledgers, dating back to like the mid 2000s, and in the most recent numbers give us the fiscal year 2019. So it's a 2018 football season. That year, Rutgers spent $27 million on football. $27 million on football. It's a lot of that is costs that is already it's already spent, whether it's coaching salaries. Back in 2018-19, it was between head coach, assistant coaches, support staff. It was almost $11 million. It's probably closer to 15 now under Shiano. You're talking about $5 million in scholarships. You're talking, a lot of this money is just already spent. So, at least over 20 million easy, probably closer to 25 million that is just, spent on football. There's nothing that you're going to get back. Now, ticket sales, 2018, they made 8 million. That was low. I think even if there is a football season, the idea that they're going to be able to get fans into the stands probably is, if I'm at 20% for a football season, I'm at like 2% that there's going to be fans in the stands that are going to be able to sell any tickets. So, we're talking spending $25 million on football alone, and we're talking about, not being able to generate ticket sales. We're talking about program sales, contributions, the seat gifts, all those types of things before you even get to the magic number that everyone's worried about is the conference distribution, which, for most Big Ten schools is about 35, 40 million. Rutgers won't get the full share this year, but, we're still talking over 20 million. So, if that's not, if those numbers don't come to fruition, we're talking about a huge number at a school that's already, at a program that's already heavily subsidized. You'd have to expect at that point. I know Pat Hobbs has said all the right things with regards to cutting sports. Doesn't have the appetite for it, but at that point, you're probably talking about a scenario where whether it's a cutting altogether or maybe a suspension of sports, like what Tulane did after Katrina. They suspended some of their sports programs, and hopefully not. But I mean, the reality is, layoffs and all that type of thing that we just don't even want to think about.
What a disaster! Just a total disaster it would be. And Kratz and Sarge took it from the broader perspective of, just the overall money. What happens just to the football program? What I can't figure out, if there's no season, do they offer the seniors to come back and then you have the incoming freshman class? I mean, how do they reconcile, what happens in 2021 if there's no football season?
Well, I would say that I think it would be probably like the similar situation we saw with the spring sports, where your scholarship numbers go up for a year. Everyone gets a year of eligibility back. You're going to have some seniors who don't come back. One thing is, very quietly, even if you're a football senior and you've been there at Rutgers for 4 or 5 years, if you get a year of eligibility back, the scholarship, they probably can kind of usher you out. So you're probably going to, I don't know if every senior on the roster now would return next year. Guys might go on to do something different, move on in life. They might go to a different place to play, something like that. I will say this, if there's a spring season, I think the NCAA has to come out immediately and say, kids who are seniors in high school now who early enroll are not eligible to play in the spring season. I think because these are going to be high school kids who haven't played a high school football season, and also we're going to be throwing them in Division I college football on the fly in like March. That can't work. To get back to what Sarge said about cutting sports, I mean, the thing I had always heard about cutting sports and people who, are in the industry is that you don't really save money now, which is when you need to save money. You save money 3-4 years down the road because you have to honor scholarships and you have to pay out coaches. And more often than not, the sports you're cutting, like for instance, and I'm using football because it would never get cut. And I don't want to use a sport that could get cut and freak people out. If you cut a football program, most of your 85 scholarship football players are going to go play football somewhere else, and most of your coaches are going to go coach somewhere else, and there's going to be offsets. If you cut the programs that you are cutting, some of these kids are going to say, you know what, I'm going to keep my scholarship and just be a student. And some of those coaches who were only making $90,000, if they got 3 years left, they're going to take their payout and be a stay-at-home parent for 3 years, so you don't save the money, and you also make a lot in tuition costs on these programs. So if anything, I wouldn't be surprised if some schools start adding sports. What's the easiest way for a Division III school to make up a budget gap? Add a football program, because you got 150 high school boys who can't give up playing football who suddenly want to pay $40,000 a year to go to your liberal arts school.
Interesting way of looking at it. Certainly, Stanford folks would disagree with it right now. Then they're
let me get to Stanford. So my understanding with Stanford is that this seems to me like those were sports that they were looking to get rid of anyway. Like squash, synchronized swimming, because they're willing to save the money 4 years down the road. They don't need to save it now, which is a school like Rutgers would need to save now. And I think that my understanding is that field hockey, which I believe was like an affiliate member of an East Coast conference, and wrestling, unfortunately, got swept up in it as a Title IX thing to kind of balance out their numbers. But I don't think Stanford, I know everyone said, oh my God, Stanford, largest endowment, they win the Director's Cup, 30 years in a row. Oh my God, the world is ending. I don't think that's necessarily a canary in a coal mine that everything's about to fall apart.
All right, guys, want to do some true or false? I have a couple here for you. What the heck?
Sure.
It's been a while.
I can't wait.
All right.
I can't wait.
You know the rules. True or false? I'll give you a topic, and you tell me true or false, and then we'll discuss. All right. True or false? Army Navy on the Big Ten schedule. Good idea. Cratch. True or false?
I'm going to say true, but no one actually read what I wrote, so we have to discuss this.
Sarge. True or false?
Is it for football or for just all sports in general?
Fine. Football.
I think it's a good idea. Crash made a lot of good points. He sold me on it. True.
You say true? I think that's just nonsense. False. Okay. True or false? Rutgers is in better shape financially than Ohio State if there's no season. Cratch.
False.
Sarge?
I understand the question.
That's why.
But I'm going to say false because, we're still talking about a very heavily subsidized program to begin with.
Okay, true or false? Noah Vedral will be the starting quarterback for the TBD opener. Cratch.
I'll say true.
All right. Sarge?
Sure. True.
True. Okay, yeah, it's probably true at this point.
Yeah.
Since it's going to be in 4 years, we'll have to know who's going to be. All right, true or false? You would feel safe at a sporting event right now. Cratch. True or false?
True.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sarge? Is that your dog?
False.
Is that your dog, Cratch?
Yes, it is my dog. I said the mute button by accident. Hazel also would feel safe at a sporting event.
Are you choking the poor thing? It didn't sound good there, Sarge.
No, she's just playing, and she chose this moment to be vocal.
That was the first. Okay, that was the first appearance by a canine animal on the podcast. Very exciting. All right, so you said false, Sarge, to the feeling safe.
I say false. I'm not putting myself in a crowd right now.
Right. So along those lines, true or false? We won't have a college basketball season until there's a vaccine. True or false? Cratch.
False.
Sarge.
False. But if there's a college basketball season, no way they have fans. And I think, like I said, I think there's a chance that they're going to try to squeeze some fans in the football games, but there is no chance they're having indoor, events with fans.
All right.
Without a vaccine.
True or false? Rutgers is a women's soccer school. Big recruiting class. True or false? Cratch.
It's one of many. True. It's one of many things Rutgers is excelling at.
All right.
And that's why Army and Navy. We'll get to that, but that's why it would be a good idea to add Army and Navy to the Big Ten.
Sarge.
True.
They're not adding Army and Navy to the Big Ten.
So, but it would make perfect sense for
for this year only.
For this year only, yes. Look, here's the deal: the Army and Navy were given an exemption from the Patriot League because athletic competition is an integral part of the campus culture and basically, if you extrapolate it out, defending the nation. Okay, it's important. It's part of the development and training and learning of the cadets. Every cadet at West Point and the Naval Academy has to participate in a varsity sport or a core squad sport. Like, they have to participate in some sort of athletic endeavor. There are going to be sports on these campuses. So if you're the Big Ten, one, I just think it's good practice to help out the service academies in a time of national crisis. But two, this conference-only approach makes absolutely no sense for the Olympic sports. The idea that Rutgers men's soccer can't play Syracuse, can't play Princeton, can't play Temple, can't play St. Joe's, but we're going to put them on a plane to Iowa. And granted, I don't know off the top of my head if that's one of the 9 Big Ten soccer schools. It escapes me. But or the women's soccer. There's 14 women's soccer programs. So we're now going to increase the travel costs during a pandemic to fly the Rutgers women's soccer team to play Nebraska. And others. So, but if you add Army and Navy to the fold in Olympic sports for a year, you suddenly have 4 neatly organized geographic quads. So Rutgers can go play home and home with Army and Navy in Maryland. They can even play 2 sets of home and home. So you could have a full schedule where everyone just gets on a bus. I actually mapped it out. No bus trip inside one of the 4 quads would be longer than like 5.5 hours. That's pretty good.
But
because
my point of college sports has been made for anything but football since like 1973. I mean, there's no.
I understand that, but I just think it's going to be an optical nightmare if they come out and say, we're going to play football during this pandemic, but cross country, a sport that literally involves running in the woods, can't be played.
I don't know. There are squirrels with the bubonic plague, okay, Cratch?
That's what I'm saying. It's like
the danger in those woods.
A sport that literally involves running in the woods away from people. Can't do it, guys. But we're going to play football. So that's my thing. And look, it wouldn't be for football. Navy's a member of the American. Army should be able to still cobble together an independent schedule. But you know what? I know fans are like, oh my God, chop blocks. Triple option. If the United States Military Academy needs help putting a football schedule together during a national crisis, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for the Big Ten to give them a helping hand. Mm-hmm. I think history would look fondly upon that decision by Kevin Warren.
All right, you make a compelling argument. Do you agree, Sarge, with the idea that if Stanford is cutting sports, then Rutgers will have to consider it too? Or are you on the other side of this one with Cratch? That was an original.
I think the one thing that Cratch is not counting for is the long-term travel costs. And he's right that, right now you wouldn't be saving a ton of money because you still have to pay out scholarships and student meals and coaching salaries. But long-term, it might make sense. All these schools do have projected budgets for 5-10 years down the line, Rutgers included. I've seen those documents, and no one knows when we're going to be able to get out of this. So again, Pat Hobbs has kind of at least publicly has said that it's not a consideration at this point. But we're talking about the worst case doomsday scenario of not getting that TV money, of not getting that $20-25 million check from the Big Ten, and not getting those ticket sales and not getting all the other things that they're going to fund the program. I don't think that the university is going to want to bail out the athletics program. That's already subsidized, some, $30 million annually. I don't think they're going to want to, give them another $20-25 million. So,
right.
I think everything is on the table at that point.
All right. Anything else we have to cover in true or false? What we got?
Well, I was just going to say, that's why I think the question about, is Rutgers better off than Ohio State is kind of fascinating because Jonathan Holloway, the new president, when they announced the decision to basically go remote only in the fall, he said we're not reducing tuition because that's what we need to be a world-class university. So I asked the university, what about the student athletic fee? With Rutgers, I believe, Sarge, fiscal year 2019 pocketed $12 million in that.
Yeah.
The university, of course, said, we've made no decisions yet. But
they're charging the students that.
They're collecting that money. They're collecting that money.
There is no doubt.
That's what I'm saying. So, like, if Rutgers...
Mark Killingsworth is on line one. Mark Killingsworth is on line one right now.
So my point is, if you're the university and you've got to make sure you keep every dime coming in, you can't really... Maybe Rutgers Athletics still gets a lot of those dimes, and maybe it all kind of cobbles together, and maybe they are, like Ohio State is Ohio State, but like a school like Purdue, they don't necessarily have a gigantic alumni base. They might be in worse position. And the other thing, too, that I'm intrigued to see is that can Rutgers tell the Big Ten, because of our deal when we left the American to join the league, you got to pay us something. There's no pandemic clause in our onboarding process. So I almost wonder if Rutgers might have a case to say, no, even if there's no football, you got to pay us this amount of money that we were supposed to make as a member of the American.
The reason I put Ohio State in there is because they probably have a $60-70 million bigger budget than Purdue and Rutgers. And they're going to lose 80,000 people in that state in the shoe for 7 games. That's an enormous amount of money. While Rutgers, of course, as you mentioned, gets its subsidy no matter what happens. So sorry, but you say that's not valid. You also said false to that one.
Yeah, only because Rutgers, it is such a hot button issue, year in, year out, that if all of a sudden there's another bailout for the athletics program, you're going to see, a complete, the faculty has been kind of a thorn in the side, so to speak. It's not what it was, in early 2000 when there was Rutgers 1000. Right now there's some murmuring. They'll put out a resolution every now and then. You'll see Mark Killingsworth every once in a while come up with some statement. That's they're throwing in their side right now. If all of a sudden you're bailing out the athletics program with another $20 million, you're going to see a complete. When keep in mind you're laying off adjunct professors and you're doing all the other things that would come along with it, you're going to see a complete revolt.
All right, let's dive into the Rutgers Insider questions. Guys, I got to thank all of you for sticking with us on NJ.com/text. We're going to have some announcements soon on how we're going to, I know some questions about subscriber content and what we're doing with that. We'll have some clarity soon, but for the meantime, thank you for sticking with us. And your questions, as always, are great. Here's one. Love the podcast. Could you tell me what the team is doing now? Are the quarterbacks throwing? Are they running plays? I assume no contact yet. Cratch, what are the Scarlet Knights doing?
So today was the first day, Monday the 13th was when the NCAA said they were going to allow mandatory on-campus workouts, which would mean that the coaches could have more, participation as opposed to no participation with the previous summer workouts. Now, the Big Ten has mandated that everything remains voluntary. So the players that are on campus presumably can now continue to work out, lift weights, train following all the protocols, and they can have more contact with the coaches at the facility. I think they can start to do a little bit of football drills, and then I believe at the end of the month we'll get into this 2-week kind of they have walkthroughs and then formal training camp. If we get that far, would begin, I think, like August 5th or so. I think it's just basically basic, summer football stuff. They don't have team meetings in person. They do all that stuff on Zoom, but that's what they're doing. I mean, I think the quarterbacks have been throwing on their own for a while. So, quarterbacks have been throwing on their own for a while now. So I think that's all kind of getting into gear.
All right, another good one here. This one's good for you, I think, Sarge. What is up with this new president? Seems like he's looking at having 5 to 10% students back on campus when there's so many other schools that are opening completely and many more that are opening with 50% of students. So I'm just curious. Do you think he's making the right? Number one, do you think he's making the right decision? And number two, just give me some impressions. I mean, the guy, the few times he's spoken publicly, seems like he is like a rock star to me. I mean, he's like very polished. He's the perfect. I mean, given what's going on in the country, on the other major story of 2020, the racial divide in the country, I just can't imagine a better choice right now. Overall, what are your impressions, and do you think he's doing the right thing with with the coronavirus?
I'll start with my overall impression, because I did interview him, at one point when he first was hired, and he was very impressive. And reading the Adam Clark story and a few other videos have surfaced. I mean, he's very, very impressive when it comes to just having a level head and just seems to be a very practical thinker when it comes to all of this. As far as doing the right thing. Look, I mean, I think a lot of these decisions were made in late May, early June, when New Jersey numbers were really, really bad. And I think he, whether it was President Barchi, who had a lot of influence at that time, and I'm sure Jonathan Holloway was consulting as well. I think they were both talking to state leaders Judy Persicelli and Governor Murphy, and I think they were trying to be as conservative when it came to opening up the campus to full capacity as possible. With that in mind, I think they were looking at any class that could be done remotely. Let's do it remotely. In some classes, obviously, whether it was labs, whether it was Mason Gross, if you're a theater student, you really can't do your stuff remote learning. You have to be in the theater. So all that type of stuff, I don't think there was any way around it. It was either welcome them back or cut those classes entirely. No one wanted to do that. So ultimately, I think he, again, going back to when these decisions had to be made, I think it was the right call.
All right, Cratch, this one's more for you. I'm psyched on the moves that Schiano is making. Is Rutgers football being seriously considered or as a front runner for any of the 4- or 5-star prospects? I know this is usually Todrick's territory, but have you got the sense that Schiano's recruiting has been at a very good level so far? Is he going to take it to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely in the mix for, Esteem, Vandermark, the guys at St. Joe's. I believe, Kyrie Banton, I believe, is a 4-star with some services. Tyrone Malone is going to be kind of the big star, the defensive tackle at Bergen Catholic. They're definitely in the mix for these guys. I just think the question is going to be, can they close it out? And if it doesn't happen in the 2021 cycle, it's happened in 2022. I mean, it's going to be kind of fascinating. And we talk about whether it's going to be a season or not. I think, how does that kind of impact the situation? I mean, I can't imagine that Greg Schiano would be against continuing to recruit at 0-0.
Oh man, there's no one in the world who would benefit more from no college football season than Greg Schiano.
And then as I wrote last week when they made the decision, if there's a Big Ten only schedule, Rutgers has to accept the reality that you might be trying to close out the 2021 class with 0-10 on the ledger.
Yeah,
because I don't like. I think if there had been a full season, if this had never happened, we wish. I think there's a very good chance Rutgers would have started 3-0, and this place would, the town would have been on fire, and everyone, it would have been this magical beginning. And even if Rutgers had lost 9 straight Big Ten games from there, the good vibes of beating Syracuse, of beating Temple, would have kind of cushioned everything. And at the end of the year, you would have been 3-9 or 4-8. You've been well on your way to turning this thing around. And now you're looking at the gauntlet of a Big Ten week after week playing Big Ten teams would be. And then, you might get Northwestern added to the schedule, but you might get Wisconsin added to the schedule. So I just think if they play a Big Ten only schedule, everyone would be very happy because there would have been football. But man, it could get really rough for Rutgers.
I just have a hard, even having this conversation, I find myself tuning out because there's not going to be football. I just find myself doing it every time we have it. I mean, but you're right to that point. It could be very difficult. Sarge, you agree with me that Greg Schiano would be difficult to take. right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously the football junkie. So I don't want to say that. I mean, but from a standpoint of bolstering the program and not having that potential 3-9, 2-8, 2-10, worst case scenario, record on his resume. Absolutely, I think he'll be able to gain momentum and and Patrick has written it. I think we've talked about it before in the podcast. There is a general feeling, and I think we're seeing it by the early signs of the recruiting that this pandemic is going to cause recruits to consider more than ever staying closer to home. So, I mean, if that's the case, New Jersey recruiting, New Jersey is one of the top, probably 5 or 6 states, when it comes to football recruits on an annual basis. You would have to think that Rutgers would be, set there as well.
All right, we got a few more. Bob from Carolina he had 9 different huge, actually 10 different observations in his text back to us. I can't go through them all, but he says he's 76 and he's going through football withdrawal. I understand where he's coming from there. There's really not even a question here. I'm going for this. Yeah, Bob has a lot of things to say. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate your thoughts. Here was a good comment. Why not bring Chuck Willery on the pod? He's got the inside scoop on everything, apparently. I chuckled at that. You gotta love the world now when you wake up and like, why is Chuck Willery trending? And then you find out. And you just want to shoot yourself in the forehead. What else we got? It's just about it here. Oh, here's a good one that I had. Do you think Rutgers men's soccer can achieve the recruiting greatness Rutgers women's soccer has shown recently? I have no idea. Kratz, you have an opinion on this?
Yes and no. I mean, look, they certainly can. I think Jim McElderry did a really good job in year 1. He clearly, knows what he's doing. But I would just say that, and I think that all of Rutgers, women's sports kind of benefit from this. There's just stronger infrastructure and more opportunities for young female athletes in New Jersey and in the Northeast than there are elsewhere. And I think a lot of these, I know definitely I experienced this when field hockey made their run to the NCAA tournament 2 years ago. These kids look at it as they're excited to come to Rutgers. They have a positive image of Rutgers because they have done a lot of, their youth clinics and camps and competitions there. And they realize, hey, I can be close to home and play in the Big Ten, which is, a prime conference for both sports. So I think men's soccer probably has to battle a little bit more of that, especially since the Big East programs are strong and the ACC and other leagues like that.
All right, gentlemen, that's all the questions I have. Either of you guys have any final thoughts before we sign off, which could be, I'm going on vacation, so it's going to be at least 2 weeks before we have another one. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just hoping. I don't want anyone to have the impression that I'm a doomsayer or that I'm not rooting. I am rooting as hard as anyone for a college football season. There's nothing I'd rather be doing come the first week of September than getting ready to write about Rutgers, Ohio State, or Rutgers, Michigan, or whoever. But it's just I'm also a realist when it comes to this, and none of the signs look promising.
I'm totally with you. Yep. Go ahead, Craig.
When we tape this next, I think, we're not going to tape it next week. If there's not a full Big Ten schedule released by Tuesday of next week, so that would be the 21st, I will start to think the Big Ten doesn't even think they're going to play football. Because I thought it was kind of telling that, on one hand, I understand they want it, because I do think that Kevin Warren, Patrick Fitzgerald, I do think that there is a little bit of a fear factor that they're trying to impress upon people. This is serious. If we don't start getting better, we're not going to play football. So I do think that's part of it. But I did think it was kind of curious that they made this big announcement and they didn't have the schedule ready to go. Because I think that would have shown a little bit of confidence, and maybe that's not what they were aiming for.
Yeah.
But if we get 2 weeks out, 2 weeks after the decision, and we still don't have a full Big Ten slate and we still don't know how it's going to work, then I'm going to start to think this is like postponing media days and then saying you're going to have a digital media day. You don't ever plan to actually follow through with the second adjustment.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. And I think what Pete Thamel said about this was absolutely correct, that it does feel like the half measure that, well, we're not going to have fans in the NCAA tournament. and then a week later there was no NCAA tournament. That could be what we're heading for with the conference only schedule. Gentlemen, I enjoyed it. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back in a couple weeks, and we'll have more clarity then, and we'll talk about what happened. Thanks.